Hey, welcome into the Sunday side sessions. I am Mike Schaefer, joined this week by Michael Severe, who we already had a Saturday side session as we left Minneapolis at 5 a.m. To get back in time for a wonderful Matt Verzel celebration of life. Just a tremendous event. Props to everybody who got up there to speak. Some incredible stories about an incredible person taken
Yeah.
from us far too soon. But I'm glad that we made it back for that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sad that we spent our Friday in Minneapolis to watch what we watched in Nebraska's 24-6 loss. I can't even imagine if I was talking to Matt Verzel for this about the
Oh,
offensive line and and what transpired. And I know it wasn't all the offensive line, and I get that Dylan Raiola holds a very key card in that whole thing too. But it was a total collective. Aside from the specialist, I'll give the specialist a pass. They were fine. Archie Wilson did his job. Kyle Cunanan did his job.
yeah.
Kevin Gallick did his job. Ja'Cory Barney, maybe don't run backwards as much inside your own 5-yard line, but other than that, great. Kenneth Williams did a wonderful job just holding his arms out because the ball was going through the end zone on every one of those kickoffs for Minnesota. We don't have to talk about the specialists again. They, and unfortunately for Ja'Cory Barney, we don't have a whole lot to talk about there either, which might be its own conversation point. So,
Yeah.
Michael, I don't know where you want to begin with this game. I've had more time to process it. I went into it very concerned about where it fell on the schedule, Nebraska's ability to come off of a long road trip win, come off of success, and then continue more success. And there's something about that building. There's something about that Minnesota program. And there's something about PJ Fleck where he loves to kick Nebraska's ass. And they did it again. And they are quite proud of themselves. And Nebraska and Minnesota have the same record right now at 5-2. They got there in different ways.
Yeah.
But these are programs that are leaving that game this weekend having to feel very different about how the rest of the season kind of goes. Now, maybe it's a 1-week thing for Nebraska, but there were a lot of threads to pull in that 24-6 loss to Minnesota. Where do you want to start?
Well, I will say that I got a text message from the producer of Big Red Wrap Up and said, how do you want to start the show? And I said, I don't know, with taps. I mean, what do you want to go with? That taps would work really well.
Oh, man.
Two things I can think of. One would be by one of the guys who spoke at Matt Verzel's celebration of life, David Benning, low-hanging fruit, as he would say. But we talked during the offseason about how difficult it was going to be on the short turnaround after going out to Maryland, coming back and playing in what's already a house of horrors. We know that Nebraska's not gone back-to-back weeks with road games and won both of them since 2006. I mean, you're talking Bill Callahan. You're talking about, Zach Taylor, Big 10 player, Big 12 player of the year offensively. So that's the first thing I would think about. But I remember this would go all the way back to, I want to say it was maybe 2008 or 2007, one of those two. It was either that horrible year of 07 or the first year of Bo. And I remember watching a football game, and it was like an upset where Iowa had beaten somebody or whatever. And they were talking on TV about it. I think about it all the time because what the guy said was their culture beat their culture. And that's what happened. Minnesota's culture beat Nebraska's culture. And I know people laugh about culture and they giggle about what's culture really mean and what's that C word mean. That's what you saw. You saw on Friday night a team's culture get them ready for a game, right? That they're not supposed to win because they're a big underdog. They're not supposed to win because they can't run the ball. They're not supposed to win because they can't stop running. They can't stop the run. They haven't been able to get to the quarterback. All of those things that were a part of what Minnesota had as a detriment, they made it a positive. And they did it because their culture is so good. And you can make fun of PJ Fleck for the row the boat and the ski you mod, all that stuff. But in the end, somehow all of that gets his team ready. And that's his culture. And that's what I think ultimately cost Nebraska is that even though they're building a culture and they're in this third year, and I think they've done a lot of things better by winning close games, but they still haven't gotten that point. They still haven't gotten the point where they can just roll out, go wherever they want, and say, hey, here's Nebraska football. We're going to beat you. No, all week long, you have to prepare. You got to out-scheme them, and they did none of those things, and because of that, they got a loss, a bad loss.
And I have such a tough time imagining that if you're someone with any level of pride and you've been a part of this Nebraska Minnesota thing, and maybe 2023 was your first experience, if you're Matt Rule or some of the other guys on this team, or you're someone who's been around, Buddha Wright. He's
Yeah.
been here
Yeah.
7 years. I mean,
Yep.
that's 6 losses in 7 years to this one program in Minnesota. And
Yeah.
obviously it's not like he's played in every game. It's not like he wears this loss. Just using that as an example, I just don't understand how a program that has struggled against Minnesota could come into this game and sort of look like they weren't. I don't know how I want to phrase it because I'm not them. I wasn't in the locker room. I wasn't at practice. I don't know how they prepared, but it didn't look like they treated this in the same way that it was for Minnesota, because you saw immediately Minnesota's flying around. They're hitting hard. They're getting after things, and like every single inch of that field mattered to them. Nebraska just had sometimes this laissez-faire. We're out here to play football. We're playing the dredges of the Big Ten. It's sleepy Minneapolis, blah, 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 blah. And it was a primetime game. Like this is the other thing. I'm jumping around here and I'm going to be doing it all podcast because my brain cannot settle in on one of the 50,000 things I don't understand. You had a nationally televised opportunity after a week in which everyone talks about your head coach to go out there and show why everyone is talking about your head coach. And the product you put on the field involved 9 sacks, 6 total points, more red zone miscues, quarterback that, can make weird flash plays where he's falling down and can flip the ball over a defender's head, and that looks cool, but also can't throw a football away to save his life when the pocket is collapsing, loses his ability to keep his eyes downfield because he's punch drunk from all the hits that he's taking, has a running back who can't step into the middle and pick up a linebacker on a blitz or understand where the pass protection concepts are. His offensive line, which is a bit of a mash unit for a variety of reasons, they couldn't diagnose where pressure was coming from. The defensive line and the second and third level couldn't get guys to the ground when it matters. I mean, it was every single phase of football.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even begin. I don't know. And it's more, I can't speak to John Butler as much because it's harder for me to diagnose that, especially off of, I haven't rewatched this game yet. I have no idea what the hell Dana Holgerson's game plan was. The more I think about it, I don't know if there was a game plan. You come out, you talk about needing to run the football, you pass 3 straight times to start the game. You go long stretches where Emmett Johnson doesn't get a carry. You have a 5-yard run, you immediately turn around, throw the ball, 2 plays, have to punt after that. It felt like we had gone backwards to like sort of the Scott Frost, we're just going to make it up as we go. Nothing builds off of each other offense. And that's really what it felt like. And it's the first time where I've just been like, what was Dana doing? What was the big grand idea here? Do you have any idea based on what you watched?
You said something earlier in this where you said you don't know how they prepared. Yes, you do. You saw it. You saw exactly.
They did.
The product of their preparation is what we saw on Friday night inside of Huntington Bank Stadium. My sophomore year civics teacher, Mr. Tillett, said proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. I've remembered that since sophomore year. And what happened was they didn't prepare whether it was because of all the talk about Matt Rule or because they thought they had all of these advantages over Wisconsin. I mean, excuse me, I'm watching Wisconsin. All the advantages over Minnesota. I don't know. But whatever the reason is, they didn't prepare correctly. I know watching the Purdue game what the weaknesses of the defense for Minnesota was. I know. I'm not obviously a coach, but I know what the weaknesses were. They watched that game. They had to watch the Rutgers game. They had to watch the Cal game. They had to watch and see all the weaknesses. But for whatever reason, they came in without a plan to actually exploit those weaknesses. That first drive, you mentioned it, 3 runs. 1 was a broken play. You run a script. You go through that script. That should be the best you look all game long, except for when you come out of halftime. Except for when you come out of halftime, because you've already redone your script. Here are all the plays that worked in the first half. That's what we'll do now. They didn't look good on the first drive of the first half, and they didn't look good on the first drive of the second half. So I don't know what they were doing. I imagine that Holgorsen thought that, because this is too many times I've seen this with offensive coordinators. I think he thought, okay, they think I'm going to come out here and to run the ball. They think because Emmett Johnson's coming home, and it's a lot of talk about that, they think that. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do the opposite of what they think we're going to do. And I hate that because my thing has always been, this is not the NFL. This is college football. And in high school and college football, if you do something better than the other team, there is nothing they can do. There is nothing. It's like the NFL where you got the brightest minds that can adjust and bring down the tape and figure that out. Or you got a guy who was the best player on his high school and college teams who's going to be able to come in and stop that. If you can do it and do it well, do it in college. And you know who proved that? You watch Minnesota. By the time the middle of the third quarter got around, they were bullying Nebraska because they knew this is all they can do. This is what they are. They are a play action, pass, waggle, bootleg throwing 15 yards you're in and running the ball up the middle. That's outside zone. That's what they do. And that's what they did in Nebraska. And for some reason, I think that Holgorsen thought, I'm going to do something opposite. I'm going to come out here. I'm going to attack. They didn't have their starting corner, one of their best corners. So maybe he knew that. But I don't understand that. When you're in college football and you do something well, come out and do it. And impose your will on the other team. And that's a big part of culture too. Understand that you can impose your will on a team. And when they didn't impose their will by the halftime, 7-6, only 7-6 at halftime, I think they knew. I think they felt it just like we all felt it in the stadium and in the press box, that Minnesota was right where they wanted and they had Nebraska right where they wanted them.
Yeah, it's hard to not have that feeling. They had 2 drives, and throughout the entire game that led to points. And I think it was like a combined 21 plays for like 137 yards or something like that. It was like a 70-yard drive and a 67-yard drive. And they finished with they finished with field goals on each one, and credit to Kyle Kinnanen, who continues to look pretty automatic other than just one bad kick against Michigan. But that being said, it also just, even when it looked okay, we were back to seeing Nebraska have to like grind out drives. Like it was the Marcus Satterfield experience the year before. They got into the red zone and all of the same issues, the same desire from Holgorsen that Dylan Raiola, he must be amazing at these fade routes in practice. That's the only thing I can imagine, because they keep calling it. And, Dane Key was wide ass open for that touchdown. And he sailed it right by him. And later in the game on a deep route, he sailed it right by him. And then when he finally hit somebody on a nice go route, unfortunately, Isaiah Hunter can't catch it in the fourth quarter. Now, would that have mattered? You're down 2 scores at that point. Maybe it boosts you. You get back into the game. Your defense gets a stop. Who knows? But it's a continuation of a trend where they've been bad in the red zone. It's a continuation of a trend where they just don't have much they can count on in that area of the field. And the bigger fear for me is Nebraska's offense has kind of been teetering between occasionally looks like it's ready to bust out and occasionally looks like it's just going to go into the garage for the rest of winter. So I don't know what version they're going to get from drive to drive, play to play, week to week. It doesn't matter. I felt like this team by the 7th game of the season would have a lot more answers for who they are and what they want to be than kind of where we're at right now. And they're going to go into this Northwestern game, and there's going to be a lot of sort of consternation about, is this Nebraska team about to backslide? We saw this a year ago. Once they start losing, we saw this in 2023. I felt like this was a lot like that Michigan State game where Nebraska rolled into East Lansing, thought that they were just going to win because they were playing a team that couldn't match up with them, kind of got their ass handed to them. Now in a different way. And Minnesota's better than that Michigan State team. But I'm truly curious how they respond to this. I mean, do you think because Matt Rule is a veteran coach and that these guys have had some success, they can flush this game and bounce back? Or do you think there's a potentially lingering after effect that wanders into the Northwestern game a week from now?
Well, I think having the game at home is going to help them a lot. I think that when you look at what the potential for this team is, and by the way, if you'd have asked me for the least likely prediction I could have given, I would have said Nebraska scores less than a touchdown. There's no way with this offense, with those 3 wide receivers, with the depth
you mean after Purdue puts up 20 something, Rutgers puts up 28 or whatever it was, Cal puts up 27, and Nebraska scores 6. That surprised you?
Take but you know what? Forget them. I'm talking about just Nebraska. What Nebraska can do and what their offense has shown they can do and the explosivity they have. If you'd have told me they scored 6, I'd have said, what happened? Did Dylan get hurt? Was there a crazy storm where the wind was blowing 50 miles an hour and they couldn't throw the ball and Emmett couldn't run the ball? There's no excuse ever for a team with 3 quality wide receivers, a quarterback who's a 5-star, with Emmett Johnson, I know when you're that hurt on an offensive line, it changes your game plan. But even before that, we mentioned the first drive. So I think what happens against Northwestern is they basically just go back in the drawing board, go back to the big whiteboard, and they say to themselves, okay, here are the things that we know we could do well. Let's do those things early, and then we'll go from there. We're going to protect Dylan, whatever that requires. If that requires Max protecting him and 2 tight ends or whatever else, we're going to protect Dylan. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to get the ball to Ja'Cory Barney. The one stat out of all the stats when I'm going through this thing is the Ja'Cory Barney one target. Forget if he got 1 catch out of 6 throws and there was a drop. They went at him one time, and one time, that's it. That blows my mind because you said this in the car when we were driving back. He's kind of the piston in the whole engine that makes the whole thing go. And when he's going well with the jet motion stuff, with the little stuff where you want to get him, 6 yards down the field and see if he can break a tackle, all of that stuff, and you don't have that in your offense, and you combine that with the fact that you couldn't commit to the run game for whatever reason, maybe because it was with offensive line, and you had a quarterback that, and I know they hate the phrase to hear this, but he was seeing ghost. By the third quarter, he was seeing ghost, and there was that one play in the third quarter where there was a inside blitz, and he just did we used to call it the Ron Jaworski. He just went to the ground. He went to the fetal position because he had nothing to do. Well, in that situation, no, you're the starting quarterback, University of Nebraska. You either try to make a throw off it, you try to spin out of there, you're taking the shot. You're not going into the fetal position. That's the last thing you can possibly do. So you go back to the beginning, you talk about all stuff that worked, and you grind out a win against Northwestern. That's the goal. From here on, and it should have been, again, on Friday night, is you got to grind out wins. You got to grind them out by your culture, doing what you do well, and getting to the end and winning with special teams because they're better than most teams in special teams. That's what they have to do.
Does it say anything to you that Matt Rule, when I was talking with Brunson BC, they described him as clipped, curt, just
no answers.
Yeah,
no answers.
That feels concerning to me. Like, if nothing else, a guy who sort of likes to hear himself talk a little bit, I wouldn't have minded if he just goes behind the pulpit a little bit and talks about, hey, we're not going to do this again. We've got to, give people something to look like someone who had no idea that this is what your team was capable of, when this is exactly who this version of Nebraska football has been in this matchup. And I understand you don't wear what happens in 21 and 22, and you've only played them in 23, and you probably should have won that football game, and there were some things that went against your way. I felt like people deserve better than what they got from Matt Rule after that game too, because and I'm sure he's going to bounce back and be fine on Monday and whatever that's going to be. But man, you had thousands and thousands of fans make that trip up to that game.
Yeah.
You have, again, a national audience. You're ranked for the first time this year. You have everything going in this direction, and your team lays this massive egg. I think it deserved a little bit better of a response. And I understand words are cheap. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But give people something. And I didn't like how things fit going into that game. It's why I had picked Minnesota. I never in my wildest dreams thought Nebraska would get basically blanked in the second half and shut down outside of 2 drives. I'm not surprised that they had issues tackling and that they let guys leak out and all of those things. But I don't know. For being in their 3rd year of a program, for the 2nd year of Dylan Raiola, for, you're now 10 games into Dana Holgerson or whatever we are with that, 11. I think this should look better than it has. And it's a little alarming to me that it sort of looks like this right now. And I don't want to make too much of it because we've seen one game can be one game. There are some things about this team that you cannot fix on the grease board, and you have to find a way to work around. And I don't know that I trust that the staff could do it, to be
I think there's a
honest.
balance for what you do as a head coach and what you say. And I think that he was trying to not make excuses while
That's fair.
trying to answer questions, right? Because I don't think he knew. Um, this is like your kid has been a good kid all throughout kindergarten, and all of a sudden, 6 weeks in, he bites some other kid. And you're in the meeting with the parent, with the teacher, and you're like, I have no idea why that kid did that. And I think that a lot of what happened really surprised him. Now, I will say, not having Vincent Shavers when they game plan to have him after the surgery. Look, I would think for a surgery in your thumb, you'd be out 1 week. That's what I would think. But obviously, they game planned to have him in there. They tried him in there. It didn't work out. We know what happened with Pritchard. We know what happened. And Spindler apparently is an incredibly important member of that offensive line, more than any of us thought. So I
That
think
or
with
the
all
gap
that
between him and not him is
is
substantial.
big, the war is huge. But I think that's the problem. He was trying not to say all of those things. He was trying not to do that at the same time, try to explain. And I don't know how difficult it has to be in your job where right after your job is over, 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes later, they bring you out there and they want you to explain everything that happened in your job when, 14 people who are sitting up there in the press box know exactly what happened because they saw it. You're trying to explain it. So I'm not making excuses for him. I think it'd be very difficult to do. I think you're right. On Monday, he'll have some better ideas. But I really feel, and this has happened a couple of times, I think you've heard it, where Coach Rule has talked about something that Coach Holgerson did, and he really doesn't understand it. Going back to the early part of the season where they didn't play the other two running backs, and he was like, well, I wanted to play them. Or they didn't pressure. Well, I wanted to pressure. Or they didn't do whatever. And so I did believe there's a little bit of a disconnect between those two guys and what they want. I think Holgerson wants to take advantage of having a quarterback that can reach every single part of the field. On the other hand, we all know Matt Rule. Matt Rule wants to run the ball. He wants to play good defense. He wants to run the occasional trick play and probably play good special teams. Those are the things that he wants to do. And so I think there is a dynamic those guys are going to have to figure out. They need to get better together with the game plan and have Matt Rule explicitly say, this is what we need to do, coach. This is what I want to see. And I don't know how that happens. I don't know why it hasn't happened already. But I think you saw two coaches that were on different pages on Friday night, and I don't know how that can happen.
Do you remember, this goes back to, it was very early in the Matt Rule tenure, and he was talking about why he felt Marcus Satterfield was going to be a good fit for what he wants as an offensive coordinator and the value of someone that can marry what your personnel is with what the play calls are. And then we go to this point now where you've got an offensive line that's just under siege, and you're getting to the end of the first half, and you know that they want to push it down there and try to get a field goal to try to grab a lead. But you can't protect your quarter. The amount of times this team goes empty, and they can't block. They have struggled 5-on-3. They've struggled 5-on-4. They've struggled 5.5 or 6 on 3 or 4. And you're going empty sets in a game in which you've already given up 5 sacks in the first half or whatever that number was. I think it sometimes goes beyond disconnect. I also just wonder if sometimes if Dana Holgerson is disconnected from what's happening with the offensive line, or if he thinks he can kind of call a game where you can maybe mitigate it by you just have to play through it, which is what they did against Michigan State. I mean, they were under assault and Dylan rolls out and he hits Ja'Cory Barney, and that flips that whole game. And maybe that's what they were searching for. But man, and the fact that they came out in the second half and it was just more of the same, I'm just dumbfounded by this. I expected this to look better. I really did. Even if I allowed that I thought Nebraska was losing this game regardless, I still thought that they would come out and look more competitive against a team that, frankly, I don't know if they played Maryland straight up that I'm taking Minnesota in that game. Maybe if they're at home and Maryland has to travel or whatever. But I think I think Minnesota's better than Michigan State. But I just, is Minnesota that much better than the Northwestern team they're set to play? Is Minnesota better than a rejuvenated UCLA? I have no idea. I just don't think that was a team that should have done what they did to you and they knew they were going to do that. That's the other thing. I mean, Minnesota felt like they were going to get that done, and then they went
Oh
and got
yeah.
it done. And PJ Fleck is going to crow about it, and he should. And I don't love the antics and everything else that PJ Flex brings in, but I do really appreciate he has a good pulse on what his team is. He has a good pulse for how he wants his team to play, and they generally line up with that. And he has done a lot with a lot less than the coaches he's faced against every year in the Nebraska series that he's played in.
I think he can tell them that they're going to do this. They're going to go out and win, and they believe him. That's who I believe he is. So before the game, the Minnesota, they're out there in their pink shirts, before the game for breast cancer awareness, and Smith, the 0 and 1 are out by the goalpost, and they're doing like fake 360 dunks. They were loose, man. They were loose. And I think it's because when that coach tells them something, and it's not just when he tells his players. I've heard this from reporters. I've heard it from analysts. I've heard it from a lot of people that when you sit and you talk to when you sit and talk to PJ Fleck, you believe what he's saying. Like he's the kind of guy that can get you to run through a wall. And so I think whenever he speaks to those kids, they've seen enough of it and they're like, yep, right, coach, we're going to go do it. I don't know if Matt Rule still has this weird mixture of a bunch of veteran players on defense still, and a bunch of young players. And there's a kind of a mix of guys who have seen it go bad before. And so until they're all gone, I don't know if they can do that. But for whatever reason, that it's almost like PJ Fleck hypnotizes them. He like gets there with the little clock in front of him, and he goes, "You are going to row the boat, and you're going to beat this team, and we're going to go out there and win at home in front of our fans." And they all go, "Yes, coach, we believe you." And that goes back to what I started off with. That's culture. That's having a coach that has seen everything and done everything, and many times he's done it with lesser talent. But I don't think this is a team that is going to go and lose the Northwestern and get beat twice by Minnesota. I don't think this is a team that is going to have USC come in here and they're going to roll over. I do believe in this team's ability to rally because we have saw it against Michigan. We did see it 2 weeks in a row with Maryland, Michigan State. So I think that they can do all of that. I just hope they better have an amazing week. I know they're taking off on Saturday and they're back to work on Sunday. They better have an amazing week. They better come out with their hair on fire with Northwestern in town. They better. Or Northwestern will beat them.
I hope in some ways it's kind of how they started against Michigan State, where you remember kind of what that conversation was like after the Michigan game, and then that starts with the hurdle, and he hits Aiden Childs right away, and you just knew like, oh, Nebraska's defense is here. They're going to swarm, they're going to play, and then they had to go through everything with the offense and all of that, and that's still going to be a potential issue. But I would hope Nebraska can come out and play with that level of intensity and enthusiasm because I think they need it. They didn't have it against Minnesota, and that's got to come from somewhere.
I've always believed, real quick, Schaefer, real quick. I believe that if you're going to be successful in the Big Ten, and I have a bunch of stats that I always follow and take them for whatever you want, but points per play is incredibly important. And Nebraska had built themselves up into an offense that was a top 17 offense in college football in terms of points per play. They were 0.111, which is off the board bad, obviously, with just 2 real successful drives. Defensively, they had built themselves into a top 40 defense, top 35 defense, and they were like 0.45 they were giving up points per play to Minnesota. That is what always worries me about Nebraska, because in the years under Mike Riley, Scott Frost, all of those numbers got worse as the year went on. The more conference games they played, the worse they got. I kind of have a chart that shows that, and I worry that they're heading that direction again. And if they head that direction, then losses come. So I am a little worried about that because I've seen it before where all of a sudden that number starts dropping off and they're no longer top 20 in offense, they're top 50 on offense, and then they're all of a sudden they're top 40 in defense, and it just keeps going down. If you're doing that in Big Ten play against the teams you ever left on your schedule, you're going to lose more games than you win.
Yeah. Well, I think this next kind of conversation I kind of want to have, and I don't know that we're going to come to any sort of great, idea of what happens next. But what is sort of your level of concern with where Dylan Raiola is at headspace wise going into these final 5 games? I mean, he looked as defeated as anybody could in the
Press
postseason.
conference. Yeah.
In that he has taken an unbelievable beating in conference play. To go through the numbers, 9 sacks last night, or excuse me, well, you're listening to this Friday night. And in that, for just what I think is coaching malfeasance, was put out there to take one more sack to end the game for just absolutely no reason. Hand the ball to Kenneth Williams, Rowdy Bauer, put a defensive lineman in at running back, just end the game. Kneel. I don't care. Don't let your quarterback take a meaningless hit when you're down by too many scores to come back to win the game. And yet they did. And so that's 9 on Friday. It was 8 against Michigan. I think it was 6 against Michigan State. It was only 1 against Maryland. And then they got sacked one time by Cincinnati. So I think that's 25 sacks in in 5 games, essentially. Of the 7 you played, Akron, Houston Christian didn't really touch you, so that doesn't really matter here. But that's a lot of sacks. And in conference play, 8, 7, or 6, 8, 6, and 9. Like, those are not numbers that should be happening in the Big Ten Conference. They're just and frankly, you still got USC who can generate some heat on you. I mean, Iowa isn't the pass rusher that they were before, but neither was Minnesota before they came into that game and grabbed 9 sacks. Like, I'm a little worried about Dylan Raiola between the ears right now, kind of moving forward too, because I think the seeing ghosts transfers from week to week. I think the more he's been hit this season, the harder it is for him to keep his eyes downfield. And for whatever reason, despite the fact that everybody screams at it, I'm sure his dad, his uncle, his offensive coordinator, his quarterback coach, his private quarterback coach, his head coach, his friends, his receivers, they're all telling him to get the ball out. It's just, it seems to be getting worse. It genuinely seems like he's holding it even longer now. And I don't know what he's gaining from that. I don't know how
sitting
this
next to
gets better
Smitty
either.
Well, I was sitting next to Smitty on one of the plays, and he was actually timing how long Raiola was holding the ball, and there was one sack where he had it for 6 seconds.
Yeah.
That is just, you can't do that. That's impossible. Nebraska, obviously, the stats I have involve Nebraska playing 7 games where the other teams some of them have only played 6, and Nebraska currently is giving up 25 sacks on the season. That's 3.5 a game. You're right. Your quarterback's not going to survive that. He's just not. I think everybody has always been kind of worried that if Nebraska couldn't get things right, that Dylan Raiola would just say, I'm going someplace that I can win, And I think people have always worried about that. I don't necessarily believe that he is going to just leave his dad's alma mater or leave his uncle or whatever else. But I do believe that there is a point where a quarterback breaks. And I think we've seen it over the years where the quarterback just gets to the point where he can't function. And I could see that happening, especially because after the game, one of the questions that was asked, I think it was asked by Amy Just of Lincoln Journal-Star. She asked, "Hey, just how you feeling? You took a beating. How you feeling?" He goes, "Well, I'm a little sore. That's just football." But it's not here that I'm worried about. It's up here. Like, how's he feeling up here? Is he still processing the way Dylan is as a football savant, I think is at one point that Matt Rule called him? Is he still functioning like that? And I don't think he is, just based off what we saw in the second half of the Minnesota game. I think the future is you go back. We've mentioned the drawing board a bunch of times, or the grease board, or whatever you want to call it. But I think you go back and you say, how are we going to protect our quarterback? And what was the answer to that question against Maryland? We're going to run the ball. We're going to run it early. We're going to run it often, and we're going to get some yardage, and we're going to be able to take some of this pressure off him. When they went against the best pressure team in all the Big Ten, they came out with that. Then they went against a Wisconsin team that's one of the worst pressure teams, at least over conference play, and they didn't do those things. I would hope when they start thinking about all this, they go back and say, the Maryland game plan was the game plan that we need to run the rest of this season. So I think that's the future of it, and that helps Dylan. That helps the team overall. That helps everything. But ultimately, you don't want your quarterback to get broken. You don't want your quarterback, and I don't talk physically. I mean, you don't want him to mentally be broken. Yep. And I think he could be close to that.
Yeah, that's my fear as well. I said this in previous podcasts. One of the things that I think isn't not a cure-all, but it's something you can sort of do. I don't understand why they don't put him on the move with a little bit more,
move the pocket.
A little more rolling out action. And he actually throws pretty well on the run for a guy who doesn't run particularly well. And so
Yep.
I would like to see that because if nothing else, you're getting him out of the hot zone. You're already starting his body moving. So if he chooses to run from that, he looks so unathletic when he has to go from in the pocket to scrambling. It takes him too long. And it cuts the field down. So then his options are 1-2 run. And I think it eliminates some of that holding. I don't know that he's going to sit back there and try to do some of this stuff. So I would like to see a little bit more kind of rollout stuff as Mando joins the podcast here. Mando wants
he's way outside too, way outside, and he's making that noise. Yeah, I know.
He wants rollouts and he wants a dog.
He does.
Yeah,
I explained this on Severe Reaction last week, and I always say this: I was not a great quarterback. We ran the Notre Dame box. We ran a inside option offense. Look, I know that. But I will tell you that just all of the research I've done and watch great quarterbacks, that when you're on the run, whether you are rolling to your strong side or your weak side, you get your feet better because you have to. You do so many reps of it that your feet get better. Even when you're going left and you're a right-handed quarterback, you just train. Let me get my shoulders turned. Let me get my foot leading where it needs to be. Let me get my hip cleared and throw the ball. I think sometimes when you're in the pocket, and I know this is true for Dylan, he gets lazy a little bit with his fundamentals.
Yeah.
So your fundamentals when you're on the run are always better because you're in your head. This is where this right foot needs to go. If I'm going that way to be able to throw the ball, here's where my shoulder needs to be. So I agree with you. I believe moving him, but just moving the pocket in general. I like the idea of giving a personal protector, more a waggle concept where you're bringing a guard or whoever you want over to protect him. And yes, you do take away half the field, which I'm not a huge fan of, but you have wide receivers who can beat man coverage so they can get open and they will give you a place to throw the ball. And so I completely agree with getting him on the move or moving the pocket with him because I think that also helps his fundamentals as a guy who occasionally will let his feet get next to him or go all arm. That gets eliminated when you're getting your feet involved while you're running.
Yep. And we haven't seen a whole lot of it. It has looked good when they have done it, though. And I'd like to see, just like I want to see more Emmett Johnson or just more run game in general, playing off of that run game. The last night was begging, or Friday night. Who cares? We're recording this on Saturday. If you haven't figured that out by now, whatever. I don't need to keep the facade going. This is a team that should be built to do some of what Minnesota was doing in their game plan against Nebraska. Yep. They should be running those waggles. They should be running the outside zone concepts. They should be running play action passes. And especially against a defense last night that wanted to commit a delayed defender on blitzes or wanted to send a guy downhill when they thought it was a run and into spaces where their defensive line might swing out a little bit wide so they could slide the linebacker right into that hole. Mm-hmm. A play action would have been wonderful. And yet Nebraska had like the really nice run pass option to Quinn Clark. So that's one. Is that it? Is that the whole list? They had the blown up broken.
They had a good screen. They had a nice screen late. I think it was the Nazea Hunter. They had a screen late. Yes, they had a nice screen late where that also takes pressure off of a guy coming after you because screen always is a good way to go against the blitz. But yeah, that was they only literally had a handful of plays where you'd have said, those are winning plays. Yep. And that's not what Nebraska's been this season overall. And I want to see more power run game. That's what I want to see. I know not everybody likes to have a fullback or a blocker in front of them, but if nothing else, get under center and put him deep in, put him at 7-8 yards deep and have him run like that. I think his vision's really good. And the more he gets along, the more he reminds me a little bit of Amir Abdullah with the way he makes guys miss. And so that's what I would want to run. I want to run a lot more of that. But for whatever reason, I don't think that is what he wants to commit to because he's got a big playbook and a lot to call. And I don't think he wants to commit to that. He's going to have to eventually say, how can we win? Here's what we're going to do to win. And until they do that, they're going to be in trouble.
And he has to also figure out how to mitigate an offensive line where you just don't know what you're getting week to week, play to play, snap to snap. And the biggest thing there, the communication has to be better. I don't care whose job it is, whether it's Dylan to set those guys, Justin Evans' job to set those guys. You cannot have, we hammered this on the ride home. This might have been where I just blacked out and talked at you for 25 straight minutes about I cannot believe how horrible the protection plan is. You had Emmett Johnson and you had Gatula step to the same area on the field and leave a free rusher as a defensive end. I saw Jay Moore at the Matt Virgil thing. I was like, how often in your career were you just given a free rush? He's like, they're the greatest moments you get as a defensive lineman. So You cannot do that. Like, you just can't make those mistakes. And I think Emmett Johnson has been a revelation for Nebraska. It is clear the weakness in his game is in pass protection. His chips aren't very good. He got ran over stepping, and maybe anybody would have gotten run over in that situation. Yeah. It sure felt like Minnesota knew exactly how Nebraska was going to do things, and they were going right to that spot. But it just has to get better. It has to get better up front with your linemen. Dylan has to be better at identifying where pressure might come from, so he knows how to win, how much time he has to get the ball out. His feel for pressure is horrible. It really is. For a guy that I think possesses a lot of traits that would make him a otherwise very successful quarterback, the ones that he doesn't seem to possess are like Achilles heels times 3 in some ways. I don't fully understand because, and I have the benefit of, one, getting to sit on my ass in a press box, but 2, I can also see a greater vision of the field than he can. But man, someone has to help him with that. I don't know if it's his uncle. I don't know if it's his dad. I don't know if it's Dana Holgerson, but Nebraska's protection plan, Nebraska's communication up front, it's not nearly good enough. They just cannot allow, some of these sacks aren't even because the defender is making a great play or he's whipping your offensive lineman. It's because they're going against air. You can't give up sacks that way. You just can't. You're already bad enough as it is. And this is a team that as soon as it's off schedule, it's hard for them to get going again offensively. They have to figure that out up front. I don't know where or how or what that comes from, but it is way, way too many games for too many of these guys to not be able to correctly identify, okay, pressure's coming from the left. I'm sliding this way. He's sliding that way. He's stepping up. They have to know this. This is fundamental stuff. It's what sort of infuriates me about that game on Friday. Nebraska just got beat fundamentally. They didn't tackle. They didn't step into the right gap for the pressures. They didn't, all of these little things, stuff that you're taught early on in football in your football playing careers. It's not like Minnesota provided a superhuman effort. They just played fundamentally sound football and ground you into the dirt. But that should be embarrassing when you watch this.
Yeah, it was a bully ball.
Yeah, and they should be embarrassed by it. They really should.
Yeah.
It should burn all week.
Burn the tape is what they should do. So there's a picture going around that I got DM'd to me, and it's Tyler Kanak leaving his space to go help the tackle when the rush is coming right over his. And I said to the guy, I don't even know if Tyler Kanak has played guard. Coming into the season, he was the third tackle. Right. I know there's no time at all in any practice where they had that combination of 5 guys on the field at any point of any practice. So I will say that is something they're going to have to work on. And I understand the communication is going to be an issue when you've not had that guy next to you, because it really becomes kind of a feel thing. My thing with Dylan is he has a blind spot for the middle of the field. And we've seen this going way back to his freshman year last year when he missed that Fedoni throw and he threw it underneath and it had been intercepted. But too many times when you hear Holgerson reference a play that Dylan missed or they had somebody open, it's usually on a crosser and it's usually in the middle of the field. It was that Emmett Johnson one where they could have gotten a touchdown on and they end up with a field goal. But too many times when you're watching it back, you're like, okay, the guy open is coming across and he's coming open. Now, I don't know if that's Dylan not being able to see through his linemen or see through the offensive line and defensive line together, but that's his blind spot. When he's throwing outside the numbers, he's a much better quarterback because he gets his timing going. I don't know what it is about the middle of the field for him. Now, I think part of what they can do is instead of calling an option route or, designate, you're throwing the ball to. I know that's a little elementary, and I think Dylan's probably beyond that, but sometimes this is what you have to do with a quarterback. You say, look, you're throwing the ball to Dane Key on this route. You're throwing the ball to Isaiah Hunter. We're getting the ball to Barney on this route. I don't want to care about anything else. Throw it to him. And you got up to 15 seconds in his ear to tell him anything you want. So I think that could be the case. I'd like to see that more, but I agree with you with the communication of the offensive line, but I would like to see him hit more of the open receivers, and the ball come out quicker. That's what I want. Everything is solved by getting rid of the ball on time. Everything. I agree. Everything is solved.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, it starts with him. I mean, a lot of this starts with him, and I think they've got to make some tweaks because I don't think you can keep doing what you're doing and have it continue to work. when you're giving up that many sacks. I just don't. And it doesn't seem like no matter how many times people tell them it's got to come out quicker, that hasn't resulted in it coming out quicker either. And I do wonder, you look at Drake Lindsay, I kind of wonder if they weren't like, all right, here, if it's zone, you're throwing to this guy, you're putting it on this shoulder because it's going to be away from, that he had a Nebraska defended it pretty nicely. There's a third down when they were deep in their own end zone, and Nebraska runs a zone. And I don't remember which receiver for him just went and turned around. It might have been a tight end. It was like a 5-yard play. But Lindsay never moved off of where that ball was going. He threw it exactly to where the defender would not be based on how the scheme was for the zone. And the guy caught it. And it was just super simplistic. And sometimes simple wins. And Nebraska could use a little bit more simple right now.
Yeah.
If nothing else, just to kind of get the offense rolling and get a little grease and move the football a little bit again.
There was a point, Mike, when I believe he was like 10 of 12 for 95 yards, which obviously is, it's 9.5 yards of completion, which isn't upper top parts of the college football, but it showed you that they knew exactly what they wanted him to do. And the longest throw at that point was the 15-yard pass to Malachi Coleman, and he broke 2 tackles to get 15. So they knew under 10 yards, the intermediate passes, that's what we want you to do. This is what you're good at. I don't know if they really know sometimes what Dylan's good at. That concerns me. Like, you don't know what the if you got 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, don't you have a certain amount of pet plays that Dylan runs really well and that your offensive line blocks well and your wide receivers? I didn't see them going to those. You haven't seen it really with that. That has gone away a little bit. Finding just the quick, I call it a button hook because I'm an old man, but just finding a guy, finding the open zone and overall tackling. Those 2 things over the last 3 weeks have steadily gotten worse. And a lot of that comes from practice. A lot of that comes from hitting in practice. And preparation. And so those are the things that those 2 things, when I look back on the game, concern me the most. Not being able to just take a profit and get an easy first down and tackling in the open field. They struggle with that. There were too many times where the wide receivers, the running backs, the one tight end, they just ran through Nebraska, ran through arm tackles, ran through shoulder tackles. And that's not, you do that against USC, they're going to score 50 on you easily.
Yeah, well, thankfully, the USC game is still 2 weeks away.
Yeah, right.
And so we got Northwestern, Nebraska coming up on Saturday. We don't have a kickoff time. You and I are hoping they're playing it at 7 a.m. on the Home Shopping Network. So just get that game started, get it over with, get us home. But we'll see on Monday what time Nebraska's playing, what network they'll be playing on. You have been a busy man. I just know in the short time we spent together on Saturday, I watched you take a ticket order for an event that you have going on. I know that you're busy with everything you have going on with the Jet Award. You got to track the best punt returners around the country
and kickoff returners. Yeah.
You're a media maven. You're all over the place and in radio and on the television. So where can people find your work, and how can people support what you have going on here?
Well, the Jet Award Foundation is, that's my regular job. And we do have a event coming up on October 24th. It's a movie screening, classic movie screening, a John Wayne classic, The Cowboys. And that's over at the Playhouse. And so I've been working on making sure we can sell all the tickets for that. That's a big one for me. But then other than that, I do big red wrap up on Tuesday nights. And that's been fun. We've had some really good shows and really good guests, and Steve Sipple on top of everybody else. And so I do that. Severe Reaction on Sunday mornings, and do some fill-ins that whenever they need me to do it on the zone. And so I have never said no to anyone. I just don't. I did I think this. I went out to West Point, Nebraska, and did a podcast with a couple of 11-year-olds.
You told me that. Yeah,
because I want to help. And if somebody asks me to do something, I'm going to try to help and do everything I can. This is a much more fun gig when Nebraska is winning. Obviously, even more than that, it's much more fun when they are playing with purpose and preparation. And when they're not, and the fans turn off and you listen to people complain, and it's just not fun. And I just want Nebraska to get to a point where we can stop having the same old thing. The Illinois game, the this Minnesota game, UCLA game last year. Can we get to a point where they're not having what John Bishop used to call a bow fart game every year. Let's not have any bow fart games. Let's just play well every game and, get through a season without them. And I don't know if they can do that. I really wonder if they can ever get back to where, and I'm not asking for 1993 through 1997. I'm asking for the mid 80s. I'm asking for, some parts of the 2010s. Just go out there and not make mistakes and look like you're supposed to be there. Give me some of that. Then it'll make everything, all these little things that I'm doing, a lot easier to do, for me at least.
I'm just asking for Nebraska to not embarrass itself on national television after an entire week where everyone talks about you. That would have been nice, but alas, they get to go work in the shadows where theoretically they should be doing their best work. And the shadows are where Nebraska Northwestern belongs next Saturday. Though I don't know how that works with where the sun is relative to how early I want that game to start. I'm going to have to do some math on how that all works there.
Do you sit in the front row? You don't sit in the front row. You're okay.
I'm second row guy. I'm fine.
That front row at 11 o'clock game, that's a bitch.
Yeah, you're baking.
You got the glasses on. You're like
cucumber
this.
Back there. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. So I'll be fine. I'll be fine. They're probably going to start it at 6:30 now on Saturday night because I've talked about this too much.
Oh my God! If it's a night game, if it's that BTN night game where they just hide it, or the FX1 one,
oh no,
that would be
more Tim Brando. Is that what you're saying?
Tim Brando's a Louisiana native. I can't hate on him too much. He is a northern Louisiana native.
I have probably professed a little bit too much ire towards Tim Brando on this podcast, so I'll let him off the hook for this week.
Trust me, dude. I understand because as Schick and Nick said too perfectly, I think that Brando's there just to do the after the game. He's got to do the game, but he just wants to go out after the game. That's his whole thing. He wants to be Tim Brando.
Well.
He does. He's very good at it. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think we're pretty good at covering Nebraska football over at Husker247.com.
Yeah.
Michael Bruns, Brian Christopherson, providing great coverage from that game. I threw a few things together. You'll get a lot more of what you heard on this if you go find those from Friday night. And of course, there's plenty of recruiting. Nebraska's going to have official visitors in town for the Northwestern game. They're going to have some big 2027s. They're going to have some guys that are committed elsewhere. And then, of course, the big visit weekend of USC coming up as well. So a lot of recruiting stuff is happening. Nebraska's making a bunch of offers. Signing day, Michael, is just like 5 weeks away on Wednesday. We are getting closer and closer to this thing, finishing up this 26 class, getting it closer to 27, which is where Nebraska seems to be doing most of its work right now. So there's just a lot happening, and we've got it all for you at Husker247.com.
I think I misunderstood you. You said signing day. You're talking about high school players. I thought you were talking about Matt Rule.
Oh, no, wow.
Him signing an extension, him signing a contract. That's the signing day I think a lot of people are wondering about.
Here's my tinfoil hat theory. There's a part of me that's somewhat concerned Nebraska was sitting on a graphic to announce a contract extension after winning on Friday night. That win didn't happen. So is that just being held under wraps with intense security over at Memorial Stadium? I don't know. And maybe there's nothing. But that
I like that tinfoil hat. I like that idea. That would have made a lot of sense.
Well, as long as they're not adding to the buyout, that's what matters here.
That is true.
That's not because I think anything needs to happen with Matt Rule. I want to be honest with that. I just think if college football program shouldn't be paying 50-some million to make their coach go away because they made a bad decision. That's on them. They shouldn't.
Or even when they didn't make a bad decision. I don't think that James Franklin was a bad decision.
No, he wasn't.
But they made the choice of saying, let's pay $49 million.
Yeah. They said, hey, we don't want you to LSU and USC where you're in demand. We want you to stay here forever.
Until we go.
It's only a couple years. And now go away. Please go away forever.
Yep.
It's college football. All right, everybody. We appreciate it here. Sunday side session. Be sure to check out. We'll have a Hypecast coming up. You already know if you've been listening, and we've had guests for the Northwestern game. We always welcome back former Husker Todd Peterson. He's got a standing offer to join all the Todd Peterson. You remember him?
Oh, heck I love it. Great blocker. Caught the ball well, but a great blocker.
Caught touchdowns on USC and Clemson. We think the only one to make that Venn diagram is a Nebraska wide receiver. Nice. With Dabo Sweeney and Pete Carroll at the helm there.
What's his hometown?
Todd Peterson is a Grand Island guy.
Grand Island, that's what I thought.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Love it. I love it. All right. Hey, best of everything to everybody this week as you have whatever you have going ahead. And be sure to check out what we have at Husker 24/7. Be sure to check out everything Michael Severe is going on. He's all over the place. Good luck trying to catch him.